What's up, Eager to Pleasers? Welcome back to another episode of the Eager to Please podcast. We're continuing our conversation about avoidance, and we're very fortunate to have a fan favorite joining us for our discussion. Her insight and guidance on our theme, Family Matters, was so well received, we actually had listeners request to have her back. She's been our number one downloaded episode. Megan Flores, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Happy to have you in the hot seat again. So how does it feel to be so loved by this community of listeners?
I'm honored. It's hard because it's like, I just enjoy having the conversation. So then even when you're telling me, oh, everyone really enjoyed the episode, I'm like, that's awesome. I'm glad it's providing value to people.
You know, I'm your number one fan, so it definitely resonates for sure. I'm going to totally switch gears on you this time, though, from what we discussed on Family Matters, and wanted to see if we could venture into the land of avoidance. What does that even mean? And why do people use avoidance as a strategy in the short run, but aren't able to see how it could potentially have costs associated with it in the future?
Yeah, I like the question because I'm like, okay, avoidance is broad, right? Like in today's world, we think mostly about people are obsessed with attachment styles. And so people immediately go to like, it's avoidant attachment styles. But then in some ways, that's almost a little bit worn out. And so I actually am more excited to talk about avoidance of, we can't live fully aware of everything all the time. You go crazy. Mm-hmm. But then I think even your question is posing, what is it? I mean, avoidance at its simplest terms is like, well, I think we have to distinguish between like willful avoidance and blind. So I think about, I don't know if you've heard of Johari's window, and basically there's 4 panes of it. It would be broken down into like what I know about me, but you don't know about me. Mm-hmm. What you know about you, but I don't know about you. And then what we both know about each other, and then what neither of us know.
Okay.
So even when I'm sitting with a client, I kind of think about that. So think about it as something as simple as like, okay, we both know she has a white shirt on. Like that's obvious to both of us. Something she might know about herself that I don't know is like a conflict at work that she's just not talking about. You know about it, but I don't know about it. Something I might know that the client doesn't know, man, they seem to really talk a lot to avoid their feelings. And like maybe they haven't gotten that feedback or don't know that about themselves. And then sometimes there's like things that neither of us know, and it's like about to be uncovered. Like I have somebody I'm working with right now, and it's a complicated problem. And I think we're just sitting in it together of like, we have guesses about what's happening, but we don't know exactly what's happening, and we don't really know the outcome. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of sorting it together. So I think we have to break it down into like, with avoidance, sometimes there's things people are avoiding that they are consciously avoiding and they know it. Yeah. So it's like, I'm choosing not to think about this thing, or I'm choosing not to address it, or I'm choosing not to do it. And then sometimes there's things they don't know, they truly do not know they're avoiding, even though other people might be able to see it. So I think can be helpful to think about it in different categories.
Actually, you took the question right out of my mouth, because I was going to ask, are there different types of avoidance strategies or avoidance behaviors? Because everyone is multifaceted. We have work lives, we have relationships, we have, I don't know, tasks that we have to do, like you just said, that maybe we don't really want to do, but we have to do. And so we're avoiding doing them.
Yeah. And in all different ways. I mean, it will never cease to amaze me how similar people are to each other, but also how different they are too. Mm. So it's like one person can avoid things by talking a lot. One person can avoid things by not talking at all. Some people avoid things by lying. All of us avoid with some level of like unhealthy coping strategy. So whether it's food, alcohol, shopping, work, but that's part of the human condition. So do you think
that there's like a psychological root in all of this, or is it a learned behavior type thing? Or, I mean, yes, a coping mechanism, but is that learned, or is it just like kind of innately in all of us?
Yes and yes. I think to some degree it's innate of like, okay, we want to avoid, for example, things that will like kill us.
Right.
So if you think about that, it's like avoiding harm. So I think biologically it's sort of in us. Hey, if I think this person, I mean, we've all been walking down the street and seen someone kind of walking toward us and thought like, I don't know about that. I'm going to switch to the other side of the street. That would be avoiding that person. I'd say, yes, I think there is probably a biological like underpinning. And then for sure, you're learning it in your family of origin. I think that's even a lot of times people will talk about like addiction being genetic. And I mean, it depends on what camp you sit in. I'm like, sure, there's some things genetically that set you up, maybe, but more likely than not, it's a learned behavior in your family. If you have a parent, and we all have parents that avoid things, it's like, if you have a parent that's conflict avoidant, you're probably picked up on that because no one was modeling healthy conflict for you, which doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility then later in life to learn how to deal with conflict, but it's certainly easier to repeat what was modeled or familiar to you.
Well, piggybacking off of that thought, if it is something that you grow up seeing and then obviously taking on as your own coping mechanism, how can we distinguish between healthy avoidance, meaning like unhealthy relationships type thing, and unhealthy avoidance, more or less responsibilities? How can we do that in a way that is beneficial to us so we know how to handle things when we need to handle them and not run away from them?
The shortest answer is like, I think a lot of issues come down to at the core is like, can you be honest with yourself? Do you tell the truth to yourself? Because you have this, what I'm going to say has to be based on the premise that you can tell the truth to yourself. And if you can, then from there, you have to ask yourself if the thing you're avoiding is ultimately helpful to you or not. Something I grew up with was like, never go to bed angry. I don't know if you had that.
I've heard that.
But it was like, never go to bed angry. Okay. So early in my marriage, I kind of lived with this like, oh, never go to bed angry. I'd be trying to sort out like a fight, or even now, it's like when we're both exhausted, overstimulated, just not in a good place to have a rational conversation. And so a lot of times I will say to my husband, like, hey, I need to just go to sleep. Like I need to pause and I need to go to sleep. And then can we revisit this? And we don't have a life where we can revisit this in the morning. Like we have kids, we have crazy, like, so then we'll like one of us, normally me, will put on our joint schedule, like time to revisit conversation.
Yeah.
That might be 3 days later. It might be a week later. Like, I don't know. And that's been so helpful for me. Now I'm avoiding the problem at the moment because it seems like to have a conversation then would be unproductive. So I'd say that is like a healthy avoidance.
Because you're setting a healthy boundary, Megan.
Yes. And I know I've done it. Obviously I didn't just do this perfectly from the beginning. Like we did it enough times for me to be like, this does not work. And like, clearly it's actually better for me, not everyone, to go to bed angry.
Right.
It's not like then we give the silent treatment for 4 days until we have the conversation. It's more just like, okay, like I'm compartmentalizing this because I know I'm going to come back to it. So I think that would be one level of like healthy avoidance. Does this avoidance actually work for you? Like when you look a week in the future and let's say you're going to have the conversation then, does that actually look like it will be better for you than doing it right now? But I think there's like an intention to it, is I know I'm avoiding this. The other thing I think people aren't honest with themselves about is like, you have a hierarchy of values. There's only so much time in the day. So it's like, okay, I mean, I work with people on this all the time. I was talking to somebody about they have an intense job, they have young kids, and they also want to play a lot of golf. Like those things don't really like go together. Or like if you're going to play golf, then your family is going to come second, like to the back burner if you're doing that for 6 hours on a Saturday, which is fine as long as that ranks higher for you than your family. Like we all have these hierarchies and you can't address everything at the same time. So I'd say that's the other thing that comes up. But again, there's intention around that. Eric and I talk about this all the time. Where are you going to fit in exercise or like taking care of yourself in addition to everything else? How do you prioritize these things? Am I avoiding my health a little bit because all these other things are stacking up? Can I afford to avoid this? Like some people can, some people can't. But again, it's an intentional thing you're doing.
Yeah. Do you have advice on how a person navigates what is worth avoiding and what's worth confronting? Because that can be confusing in and of itself. Or, for someone who's not able to discern, like, okay, or is just always a runner. How do we navigate that?
I think the simplest thing, I don't know if it's simple. It's simple, maybe not
simple.
easy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, simple, not easy. But this is something I ask myself probably every day. Now, I'm hyper aware. Like, I can be avoidant relationally, but I think in some ways I could use more avoidance of things. However, I ask myself a lot. It's like, hey, if I do this thing today, or if I avoid it, whatever that looks like, what does this look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? How does this look?
Yeah.
And I think that's the number one thing people don't think about. Like I have a lot of anger, and like anger in the sense of like, I want people to think about these things. I give the example as like when I started dating seriously, like I was like, for a long time I was having fun with my girlfriends, like whatever. But then I was like, I didn't start dating because in that moment I thought like, I want to be married and I want to have a family. I started thinking like, in 5 years, I definitely want to be married and I would like to even maybe have one kid. Man, if I want that in 5 years, it's going to take like maybe a year or 2 years to meet somebody, and then like another year or 2 years to get married. And then I don't necessarily want to have a baby like the day after my wedding. So I like worked it backward. It's like, I might need to get more serious about this now because I'm looking ahead. I'm so grateful. After we had our first child, Eric had some work fluctuations and we started talking about like kind of the vision for our family moving forward. Mm-hmm. And one of the conversations we had was like, would it be better if I worked and was the breadwinner and he did something smaller that allowed him more access to care for our family? And he ended up saying like, I don't think that's best, because as our kids this was when we had one child, but he's like, as our kids get older and we have more of them, I think your desire is going to be to spend more and more time with them. Mm-hmm. And if I stay with them 5 years from now, I'm not going to be able to get a job after being out of the workforce that would allow you to do that. And at the time I just thought, okay, like, and I can tell you as it's gone on, I am like, thank goodness he had some future vision to kind of know me and know him and know our family setup to be able to predict that.
Yeah, for sure. I have the opposite problem. I have the opposite problem because I did stay at home with the kids. Okay. And when I was ready to go back into the workforce, it was hard to find a job because I had been out for so long.
Yeah.
And, all of these people that are just coming out of college, are sharp and, fresh, and they're just out of college and eager and all this stuff. And it's like, but I have the experience, like I've been multitasking and doing all these things that might not necessarily translate on a resume, but I mean, it's job experience. You're keeping people alive and multitasking and managing separate schedules and all of the things. So, yeah.
But you bring up a good point. That's a larger discussion for like maternity leave, women coming back, and how do we make this advantageous for companies? And I mean, I talk about that a lot and I think about it, and it's complicated. And my dream scenario would be that there were like more options to stay like part-time, or quarter time. But I know in some ways that's not practical, but it's anyway, another discussion for another day. But the thing is you made a decision at the time to stay with your kids. Like some people, I work with people all the time like this too. It's like they stayed in their career and now they're in the difference. Like, it's like their kids are really struggling. And it's like, man, I didn't really think about this. Yeah. And I kind of avoided this confronting of like maybe what was best for my kids or, that kind of thing. And now here I am. And I'm picking up the pieces.
I know there's no good answer because you're kind of like you're screwed one way or another, I feel like,
Well, the good answer is the recognition that like we're not gods. And so it's choosing knowing your values. Mm-hmm. That's what I try to help people do all the time. It's like, my values are not your values, and they're not the next person's values. And what's important is like that you know yours, so that you're not looking to the next person or what they're telling you on Instagram, because there's not like a universal, it's like, I don't know, one person, maybe it is better for the mom to work and hire a great nanny or a day, whatever, because that's the better setup. And that makes the mom the best version of himself.
Yeah.
But I don't know, in another person, it's like, no, maybe it is best for you to be present with your kids. It's best for you. It's best for them. Like, it all comes down to like what your values are, what you think are as important. And then how do you live in alignment with those?
Yeah.
And so I think true avoidance is when to come back to your question, it's like, if I gave people one piece of advice and they walked away with one thing, it's like, you have got to start thinking about your life 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. That is how I sort when Eric and I get in these fights, because marriage is, I love him, but also like there's tricky things to navigate. I think to myself, like, if we don't sort this problem out today, where's that going to leave us in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? It might not be recoverable. Mm-hmm. And that might sound dramatic, but I think a lot of people are living in the awareness of that.
I agree. That's actually some really good advice, is just trying to start forward thinking and carving out chunks of time where like, what's this going to look like? If I do this now, what's this going to look like tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years down the road?
And it's like within your best guess, like we can't predict
I wanted to shift a little bit, since this is Mental Health Awareness Month. How does avoidance have an impact on one's mental health, whether it's positive or negative?
The first thing I would say is I truly believe everyone is like doing the best they can with what they have at the time. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do better, but I remember early on, like, eating disorder is part of my story. And a therapist I saw in like my early 20s said, like, I'm so grateful for your eating disorder because it kept you alive until you could get to this place where you could actually look at some of the things in your life. And so that's a really good example of like, hey, here's this thing that was super destructive in my life. I'm not like saying everybody go out and get an eating disorder, like,
right.
But there's also some credit to like, oh yeah, this definitely helped me avoid a lot of things until I was in a place where you can confront them. So I think there's a lot of room for kindness of like, now, obviously, if you're sitting there right now with some sort of addiction and you're like, oh, it's just helping me and that's the best I can do. It's like, well, you're kind of aware at that point. So maybe let's do something different. So I think that's one of the ways I tell people, like, do better and you're doing the best you can. So like hold both, like have some compassion for your story and where you're at. We live in a world with a crazy amount of resources. Sure, you can go to therapy, but also there's enough podcasts out there. If you can't afford therapy, you could podcast your life away right here.
That's true.
You can talk to ChatGPT. I mean, it's not necessarily a substitute, but it sure as heck are good free resources.
So I'd
say that. Yeah. And then, I mean, I just think, again, avoidance ultimately comes down to some level of lying to yourself. You have to lie to yourself to stay in like willful blindness or avoidance. And that, I don't care what anybody tells you, there's no way that creates inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
So to some level, it's like, well, yeah, it's like avoidance is certainly making your mental health worse because it's probably causing a lot of anxiety. Right. You probably are judging yourself for not confronting it or not working on it. Mm-hmm. Even if you tell yourself, this is the best I can do, or I can't do anything, or that like nobody believes those things that they tell themselves. So I'd say, again, when we're distinguishing, there's a difference between intentional avoidance that is a choice. Early on in my career, I had this client who had early sexual trauma. And I had been trained that this person needed to confront this. And I really, like my clients are also my teachers. I really learned from working with this person for many years that this actually was better for her she had made peace with it in her own way without going into a lot of details. And actually, it was better to avoid going into the traumatic details of the situation.
Yeah.
And so I would say, again, that comes down to like, that was intentional on her part. We talked a lot about it. We talked about the pros and the cons. We talked about how it might be impacting her current relationships. Like, we did all sorts of work even around it. And I really learned by the end of kind of this many years of working with this person that, like, I do believe, you know, you take advice outside of yourself, but then ultimately that people know themselves best, and we have to make decisions for ourselves at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And this person really taught me that, like, this was a good choice. And maybe they'll confront it at some point in their life. I don't know, you know, but at that time, it really helped someone with a fragile sense of self make a really meaningful life.
So what are some things that or some ways that you coach your clients on, I guess, practical strategies for addressing intentional avoidance and helping them be brave to say, okay, you know, I got this and I can deal with this?
My initial answer wants to be like, well, it depends on what it is.
Yeah, I guess,
so, like,
I guess that's true.
This example I gave with sexual trauma is like, we talked about it a lot and I kept giving agency. I would say, hey, it seems like this is how it's showing up in your marriage. It's preventing you from having the intimacy that you could have with your husband. And then I said, are you okay with that? Then they would kind of say, yeah, for now. So I think I confront people with the reality of their situation. It's like, hey, if we go to like exercise or health or whatever, it's like, hey, you know, it looks like you're gaining weight. I don't necessarily say that unless somebody invites me into it, or they're saying it. And I'm saying back, like, okay, like, does this seem important for you to be working on? And they're saying yes. And I'm saying, well, you say yes. So I'll point out where their values are out of alignment. Like, you say yes, but you're not doing anything about it. So that's call to
action then. It's like, okay, so what are some things that you think you could be doing in order to address that thing that you want to work on? Okay.
And then if I say something like, most popular strategy ever out there right now, it's like, get a walking treadmill for under your desk. Or like, you know, if it's like, I don't have any time, then it's like, okay, get a walking treadmill for under your desk and take your calls on your walking treadmill. And they're like, oh, I can't do that. I don't like to walk when I'm on the phone. You know, then I'll say back, normally I want the client to come up with the solution because people know better than me. But we're also doing it collaboratively, but I might give feedback of like, okay, it doesn't seem like you've really come up with any ideas. I've come up with 3. You've rejected all of them. So tell me, like, is this thing not a high priority to you? And so again, that comes back to like, I help people work on their values. Not like we don't sit there and, I mean, we can, but I don't sit there and like draw out a vision board with your values. It's just kind of like, as you're talking about them, it's becoming more clear to me. I kind of reflect if it's becoming clear to them. So I do a lot of that. I do a lot of this, like, hey, if you keep, again, another thing I believe is like everything is sustainable in the short run, or everything is sustainable today, you know? So it's like, I'll have people come in that just smoke a lot of marijuana or smoke, or, you know, in today's world, smoke or drink or cough syrup it, you know, whatever it is.
Oh my word.
And it's like, okay, this is kind of, and these are successful people, like, you know, work from home. But it's like, okay, this kind of works for you today. And again, I'm always pointing forward. I'm like, do you like the way your life looks if you keep on the same way 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Most of the time when I start asking people that, it's a no. So that question alone will help people. And then the other thing is helping people work in like really manageable chunks. If lying is like a huge part of your life, and lying to other people and lying to yourself, like, I'm not necessarily telling you, you know, I don't know how familiar you are with the 12 steps, but it's step 5 where you start going and like making amends with people and kind of clearing up these lies. It's not step 1. Okay. So we want to chunk these things appropriately. But if I was a listener, you can look at the question one of 2 ways. It's like, hey, what are you avoiding in your life today? The other way to ask the question is like, hey, what do you want that you don't have? So that could be like, Oh, or what do you wish you had? Like, oh, I wish I had a better relationship with my child. Okay. What are you avoiding right now, today, that's costing you the relationship you want with your child or adult
I think
child?
it also, just from listening to you, comes down to the person who is doing the avoiding needs to want to not avoid anymore, or is ready to run through the fire, because being uncomfortable, no one likes that feeling. And so it's getting yourself prepared to do that. But I think that's where the question becomes, like, how do you get yourself teed up to be like, okay, yep, today is the day. I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm going to dig into the mud and just do it.
I mean, that's the question I'm asking myself every day, Natalie. So I think it's like, for me, it either looks like one of two ways that it swells around within me. One is like, how do I get myself more motivated to make a change for something I say I want?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I'll kind of ask myself, I say I want this. Why am I not doing anything about it? The other thing I'll say is like, yeah, why do some clients change and some clients don't change? Like, what's missing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think kind of there's two reasons people change. People think they change because of insight and knowledge. Typically, that's not why people change. Typically, people change because they're in a lot of pain, like a deep, deep amount of pain and suffering. So like your life has come crashing down, or you're just really suffering, or that kind of thing. Or you really start to wake up to your anger. And when I say anger, it's not what people normally think about anger. So we're not talking about like explosive, uncontained feelings. That's rage, and rage is normally more fear-based. True anger is like, tells us what we want. What do I want? What am I passionate about? And a lot of people aren't awake to that. That'll be some of my work with people, because it's like, okay, you can come into my office and name like, oh yeah, like I want a romantic partner and I should probably, get my life in order a little bit, maybe cut back on whatever substance and this and that. But saying that to me doesn't normally make anybody do anything. I'll work with them on like, where's your anger? Like, what do you want? Get more specific. You want your life to be better. How do you want it to be better? I want a romantic partner. Okay, what kind of romantic partner? What traits do you want this person? Okay, now we've identified those. Where do you find a person like, well, also what this person you've identified you want, would they want you? Like, what are you bringing to the table? Okay, then it's like, now where do we meet this person? And what are you willing to do to meet them? I think those are the two things that make people change, is pain, a lot of pain, and then getting angry enough, which kids are great. Kids are great if you watch them with anger. So I lead a lot of, we've talked about it, therapy groups. And in the group, I'm like a huge fan of group therapy. I'm like, if you want to change, go do group therapy with a good enough therapist. And so people in these groups, you'll have the one I was leading tonight has 12 people in it, 2 therapists. And it's not like everybody goes around and has a turn, like A person, B. It's just like your family dinner table. Like you either talk or you don't. Like you're going to get what you get. And so you'll watch people really struggle to talk. And they'll then get mad at the therapist, which is what we want. Like we're kind of representative of mom and dad. And they're like, well, I don't know what I want, or I don't know how to talk in this group, or I don't know what to ask for. I don't know what to say. And so that's part of the struggle. But if you watch a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, which I have both of, like, trust me, they are so good at getting what they want. They'll be like, Mama, can I have some water? And I'm doing like something else. Yeah, baby, I got it. And then I'm getting somebody else food. Mama, could I have some water? Like, they might ask like 6 times before I'm like, crap, the water. And that's not because I'm trying to like punish them. Or now my oldest will be like, can I get the water myself? And I'm like, yes. Part of me feels like a little sad that I'm like not able to get her everything she wants. And the other part of me is like, heck yeah, go get it for yourself. Yes. So we all had it in us as kids. It just got killed out of us. Awesome advice.
All right. So we talked about types of avoidance, where avoidance is rooted from. But are there different emotions that contribute to making the decision to avoid something? I guess the obvious ones, like fear was probably one. Like if you're afraid of doing something, you're obviously going to avoid it like the plague. Yeah. And I've also been told,
Yeah.
I guess on the flip side of that, avoidance creeps out of perfectionism because you're so afraid to make a decision because you don't want it to be the wrong one. But then it has to get done eventually. So you just hurry up and do it. And then whatever comes out, comes out.
That's a popular one. I avoid this, which then again, I'd say like that has some sort of deeper underpinning and like you don't trust your own ability to be resilient or to figure it out, which I think we're living, again, not to get into something else, but we're kind of living in a world like that. Again, going back to kids, sometimes I'll notice like, oh, I don't want to let my child fill up their own water because it might spill on the floor and then it might do this. But again, if you don't give people opportunities to do things for themselves, and fail is a strong word if you spill water, but like learn how to keep the water in the cup, then they'll never learn and then they'll doubt their own resourcefulness. So I do think we're living in a culture that people have become more and more afraid to take risks. And so it keeps people paralyzed because they think, you have to kind of know the answer before you ever even start.
I feel like that in certain areas of the world too. I mean, I came from the Northeast where I feel like the culture there is always productive. Like you always have to be producing. You always have to keep up with your neighbor. And it's exhausting. And if you don't, then you're going to be, left in the dust. And then when I moved to the South, I feel like, not that it's not like that, but I feel like it's just like an easier pace. Like I don't feel as much pressure down here to have to keep up with that. I don't know.
Eric and I talk about this from an economic standpoint a lot. If we grew up in totally different economic situations. And so like, if my car broke or my parents' car had an issue, they took it to the shop. If Eric's family had a car that had a problem, like they figured it out. Somebody learned how to fix a car. So inherently, it's like Eric has so much more, in some areas, so much more like self-confidence and willingness to try things and figure them out and mess up because they didn't have the money to fix problems. Whereas in my family, it was a different economic situation. And so I didn't have to figure out a lot of things. Whereas emotionally, I did have to figure out a lot of different things. So I'd say I feel very well resourced in that way. And, he had it more abundant, like some things were more abundant and it worked better. So I think you bring up a good point, like East Coast versus the South. I would imagine like even the South in the city versus the country or East Coast, economically where you grew up, what your family structure looked like in general. I think about it as I'm mothering because it's so easy to overfunction. Like, I'll do it. I'll do that. But my kids want to make their own lunches. They want to fill up their own water bottles.
Good for them.
And then I have to practice holding myself back because I can do better. I'm like, they put their shoes on the wrong feet. And it's like, okay, who cares ultimately? But I can do it faster. So now I just build in time to allow them to do it because I value them being able to problem solve. That comes back to a value thing. I want my kids to be able to problem solve, to be able to be resilient, to be able to be interdependent. So I'm not into independence at all. Like, to try things for themselves and then ask for help versus being dependent on me or overly independent. And these are all the things I value. So I make sure, like, when I want to go just fill my child's water bottle up for him, that I come back to, oh no, I do value them learning. Like, let them do it. And it's like a boundary, kind of off avoidance, but some level of boundaries and future thinking. I think the other feeling to come back, I think we could go through all the feelings that help people in avoidance, but I'd say hurt. Like when people feel hurt, at least I do, it's like, I don't want to go talk to somebody about how they hurt me.
Yeah. Never fun.
And so some people might avoid it inside of themselves. Some people might avoid it by like talking to somebody else. You'll see this in families a lot. The mom is hurt by one of the kids, and instead of talking to that child directly, these are adult children, she talks to the other sibling, and that's an avoidance. You might be talking about it, but you're not talking to the person
you're not
who
being
you
direct.
could repair with.
Right. You're not being direct. I mean, I've also seen this within friend groups. You know, one of my kids was experiencing this in a friend group where a friend went to another friend to tell my daughter something. And it's like, well, why didn't that girl just come directly to my daughter? It's, it's like the game of telephone almost. And then something is bound to get lost in translation, and then things spiral out of control. So yeah, avoidance is a tricky one, because there are reasons why we do it and we know we shouldn't do it, but overcoming the fear, I think a lot of it does come down to fear and not knowing what the outcome is going to be or how that other person is going to react when you do address them, because no one likes being surprised with a bad reaction, but then you still feel heavy because you haven't gotten it off your chest. For me, I think it deals with a lot of fear, but I don't know.
Fear, and as you were talking, I was thinking too, like sometimes we don't have the skills. And so again, that's a great place to start to resource yourself. Again, if I don't know how to have this tricky conversation, if you have a good and helpful enough parent, it's like your daughter could be saying to you, Mom, like, what should I do? And then you could say like, well, let's practice. Like, what are you going to say to Sarah, even though nobody's named Sarah anymore, but what are you going to say to Sarah? And then you could give feedback. And we can do this as adults too. I mean, I might say to a good friend, like, hey, can I run something by you? Could I practice something with you before I go say it and get some feedback? So that's a way to learn skills. Again, a lot of people go to therapy. And then a lot of the people that come from individual therapy into my groups are specifically working on like having hard conversations. And so they're practicing in individual therapy. You can talk to your therapist about like, oh, I might say this or that to my mom. In a group, you're going to have somebody hurt you in the group right there.
Oh.
And then I can see the hurt, and then I can also help you with the repair. So it's like live action.
I was going to say real-time learning. There's nothing better, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is the best way to learn.
For sure.
Vulnerable, but certainly effective.
Absolutely. Megan, thank you so much for spending your time with us today on avoidance and how we deal with it and what it means and ways that we can practically manage it. So before I let you get out of here, I wanted to see if you had any last thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners.
I think I would just say, like, think about your future self. You know, there's a lot of data out there. I can't think about it, but you can go Google it of like the 5 things people most regret on their deathbeds. I know at least enough that most of them are like, I wish I would have worked less and spent more time relationally. But a lot of people work because they don't have the relational skills. So then when they try to do the relationship, it sucks. And so, of course, I'd rather go to work where I feel effective than try to do this relationship. But at the end of the day, at the end of your life, I know it might sound morbid, but if you don't have this perspective, I think you'll just let a lot of things go that ultimately cause more suffering in your future self. So I think I would just encourage everyone, I would encourage people to think about their future self. And then I didn't say this earlier too, but I also think about my younger self, somewhere around like 9. Would my 9-year-old self want me, like the purest, like my little self, used to think, for example, going back to my marriage, like I used to just think about, oh, I can't wait till I have my own family and my husband. So it's like, I think about that younger part of me. Like, would she have wanted to be in this fight, or would she have wanted to say this thing? Or think about your future self. And I think the easiest check-in is like, would myself 10 years from now like these decisions I'm making? Would my 10-year-old self like these decisions I'm making? And that's what I would leave people with.
It's a good gut check. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for what you're doing.